How you going, everyone? This is the first in a series of book reviews I'm going to do. So they're essentially all going to be books on healing from trauma, somatic healing, mindfulness. They're not all going to be the same. Some will be more in depth, and some will be brief and just more just talking about what I liked about the book. So the book I'm talking about today is this book here, Heal the Body, Heal the Mind, A Somatic Approach Moving Beyond Trauma by Susanne Babbel, PhD. I think it's a really great book. It's not too heavy. It's not too long. It covers so much in. It's 170 something, 164 pages long, and within that, it covers so many topics, and it has practical. This is not just a book about topics. It's practical. So each chapter has activities and quizzes and checklists, those sorts of things. So it is a book about somatic healing. It doesn't really go into depth too much about, because there is so much with that topic. What it does is it gives you a really good, broad, approachable introduction to topics, as well as things that you can do and implement as a repetitive exercise that you can do. So I'll go through the chapters. For this one, I will go through the chapters because just to explain how the book's laid out and what I like about it, as far as it's a really good introduction to somatic healing. It's practical. It's very easy to read. It's a pleasure to read. It can be mildly triggering. It doesn't go into details too much about people's experiences, but there is enough there that it could be triggering, but I believe that it's very minimal. So the first chapter is called Understanding Trauma, and it essentially goes through and explains what is trauma and different types of trauma. One thing this book doesn't really mention is complex trauma, and that's a conscious, I guess, decision by the author. And it's sort of, in a way, I think that's sort of good, because it sort of unites everyone, regardless of whether it's PTSD or CPTSD. So I think it's and it doesn't compare so much, but it does. So in the first chapter, it explains the different types of trauma, and it has trauma tests. Now, this was a triggering thing for me, because I essentially went through all the lists, and there wasn't many things on the list that I didn't have experienced. So that was quite triggering when I went through that part of it, because I was overwhelmed by that it wasn't just one or two things on the list. But again, it's not comparing. It doesn't matter what it is. The beauty of this book is that it will give you practical things in so many different areas that can help you move on and heal. But yeah, so the first chapter's got the symptoms test as well, so that you can read your behaviors or your emotional states, and you can sort of get a fair idea of um, what level or what particular traumas you've having to deal with. Once you've associated that, that then gives you the ability to specialize in how you're going to deal with it, treat it, heal from it. Second chapter is how trauma impacts the body and health. Again, good descriptions of how trauma does affect your general health and well-being, and it has several activities that are for self-care and grounding, very practical activities that you can implement and have as part of your sort of daily or ongoing thing. And it introduces mindfulness as a modality. Chapter 3 is love after trauma. So it does go into love, and sexual healing does feature in this book. So again, it's got classifications and a health check test. It goes through different behaviors like avoidant and anxious, and looks at red flags in relationships. And there's an inner child activity and unlock your heart activity, which were both I thought well presented. One thing I found with this book is that it's something that the activities are achievable, and they don't take a lot of time. So they're the sort of thing you can either do every so often or implement it into your daily or weekly regime. Sexual healing, it goes into sort of details about the topic of how it is a sensitive topic. It has a relaxation exercise and a couples exercise, and so that applies obviously if you're in a relationship. Chapter 5, creating a trauma-resistant relationship. I thought this was a really good, informative chapter, and it sort of it gives you ways that you can implement a communication to strengthen and improve relationships. This book is something that could be read by people who have experienced trauma, or someone who's living with someone who's experienced trauma. So it could be beneficial for everyone in that sense. So there's some really good exercises in that again. So, it goes into more detail about dealing with conflicts, and there's an exercise for that, and a reconciliation plan. And so these are sort of practical things that you could practice if you're wanting to repair relationships. You could actually use these exercises yourself. Chapter 6 is a really interesting one, and this is where it's called overcoming financial and career barriers. So this is where I guess trauma affects our success, and the self-defeatist or self-sabotage and self-denial, allowing people never to succeed in life, or create barriers for getting past the barriers that exist because of the trauma, and how to identify them, and ways of actually moving past them. So again, there's each chapter's got practical exercises. So in this chapter, it does talk about the trauma responses of fight, flight, and freeze, but it doesn't go into fawn. But it does go into detail about behaviors that create barriers. And so the exercises, again, it's got good exercises that are practical. So it extends to the workplace too. It talks about how work can be a stress, and how to actually rearrange things with work so that it's less of a trauma trigger. This chapter actually has more exercises, I think, than the rest. Chapter 7 is triumphing over disempowering beliefs. Again, this is an extension of the previous chapter, and it has some good activities. Embody personal power activity, discover trust activity, and gain self-worth activity. I've found all those really good. I think this chapter is really valuable for people who are stuck in not moving forward, and so finding ways to break cycles or move past self-imposed barriers, and become aware of them, what they are. So it has an activity called Learn to Recognize What You Want, and a really good one called Hold the Reins of Your Beliefs activity. So there are a lot of cognitive-based therapy type techniques in this chapter. And then the final chapter, there's only 8 chapters in the book, is called Vuja Day, which is like a George Carlin coined saying, which is like the opposite of deja vu. So finding meaning after trauma. And then so it talks about post-traumatic growth, and what it can look like once you've achieved a certain amount of healing. And it talks about continuing that healing and growth in a sustainable way. And it has a simple mindfulness meditation activity at the end of the chapter. I think the book is really worth reading. It's well written. It's got great exercises to do. It covers lots of topics. It's not overly triggering, and it's not too long. So I think that these are benefits for it. So heal the body, heal the mind. Check it out. So I'll keep doing these reviews, and thanks for joining, and I'll be back again soon.